Hello everyone, welcome back. Last time we have started discussing about the muscles of the forearm, and we have covered the muscles in the anterior compartment of the forearm. So in this video, we'll be exploring the muscles in the posterior compartment of the forearm. But before we jump into the muscles, as we have discussed last time, forearm has two compartments, anterior and posterior compartment. And proximally, the two compartments, they are separated by intermuscular septum, radius, interosseous membrane, and ulna. But in the middle and distal part of the forearm, the two compartments, they are only separated by radius, ulna, and interosseous membrane. We don't have intermuscular septum in the middle and distal part of the forearm. In the anterior compartment, they have a common action. Their action is flexion and pronation. The posterior compartment, similarly, it has a common action. Their action is extension and supination. And like the anterior compartment, posterior compartment has a common origin site. Most of the muscles in the posterior compartment, they originate from lateral epicondyle. The muscles in the anterior compartment, most of the muscles, they originate from medial epicondyle, but the muscles in the posterior compartment, they originate from lateral epicondyle. But not all muscles, there are exceptions. And their function is extension and supination, or this compartment is known as extensor supinator compartment. And the muscles are arranged in two layers, superficial layer and deep layer. And all of them are innervated by radial nerve. Generally, in the free upper limb, all extensor muscles are innervated by radial nerve. So in other words, radial nerve is known as nerve of extensors. It supplies all extensor muscles in the free upper limb. And as you see it here, when we see the muscles in the forearm, the belly lies proximally, and they have long tendon that crosses the joints. So holding the tendons in their position, we have a thickening of the deep fascia, which is known as extensor retinaculum. So extensor retinaculum is the thickening of the antebrachial fascia, and it prevents popping of the tendons. Similarly, in the anterior compartment also, holding the tendons in their position, we have flexor retinaculum, and this is also a thickening of the antebrachial fascia or the deep fascia. So we have extensor and flexor retinaculum, right? And they hold the tendons in their position. So first, let's see the muscles in the superficial layer. So there are 7 muscles in the superficial layer. We have anconeus, we have brachioradialis muscle, we have extensor carpi radialis longus muscle. If there is longus, there needs to be brevis. So we have extensor carpi radialis brevis muscle. We have extensor digitorum muscle. We have extensor digiti minimi. And the last and the most medial muscle is extensor carpi ulnaris muscle. And all of them are innervated by radial nerve, and most of them originate from lateral epicondyle. Now let's see the muscles one by one. Let's start with anconeus muscle. It's a small and triangular muscle, and it lies at the transition of arm and forearm. So some of the anatomy books, they consider anconeus as part of the arm, and some of the books consider it as part of the forearm. So it's at the transition of arm and forearm. So it originates from lateral epicondyle, and it's inserted into ulna. It's inserted into the olecranon process and posterior surface of ulna. It's a short muscle. It doesn't cross the wrist. It only ends here. And when it's action, it's a weak muscle. It's a synergist muscle. It assists triceps in extending the forearm. And in addition, it crosses the elbow joint. So it stabilizes the elbow joint. The second muscle in the superficial layer is brachioradialis muscle. So brachioradialis muscle, as you see it here, it lies in the anterolateral aspect of the forearm. And as the name indicates, brachioradialis, it originates from brachium or arm and is inserted into radius. And the only bone in the brachium or in the arm is humerus. So it originates from humerus. Specifically, it originates from the lateral supracondylar ridge of humerus. So when we see the distal end of humerus, we have these bony projections, bony bits, which are medial and lateral epicondyle. Above the epicondyles, there are bony ridges. Above the lateral epicondyle, we have lateral supracondylar ridge. Similarly, above the medial epicondyle, we have medial supracondylar ridge. So brachioradialis originates from the lateral supracondylar ridge. So radialis, as the name indicates, is inserted into the distal part of radius, just above the styloid process. And its function is flexion. So this muscle is unique in that it lies in the posterior compartment, in the extensor supinator compartment, but its action is flexion. It's a weak muscle. It flexes the elbow joint. It doesn't cross the wrist joint. It ends here. So it only acts on the elbow joint, and it's a weak flexor. And it mainly acts when the forearm is in mid-pronated position. So as you see it here, when the forearm is in mid-pronated position, this muscle can flex the elbow joint. So we use this muscle to just drink a cup of tea or drink a glass of water. So this muscle is known as drinking muscle. The next two muscles are extensor carpi radialis longus and extensor carpi radialis brevis. These muscles lie just below brachioradialis muscle. This is brachioradialis. Just below brachioradialis, we have extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis muscles. The longus is partially covered by brachioradialis muscle. So their name indicates longus and brevis. So their name indicates their relative length. Longus is relatively long and brevis is smaller than shorter than the longus. So when we see their origin, longus originates from the lateral supracondylar ridge. Like brachioradialis, longus, it originates from the lateral supracondylar ridge of humerus. But brevis originates from the lateral epicondyle. And longus is inserted into the base of second metacarpal, but brevis is inserted into the base of third metacarpal. So they have a different insertion site. Longus is into the base of second metacarpal and brevis is into the base of third metacarpal. But they have a common action. Their main action is extension of wrist, but in addition to extension of wrist, they abduct the wrist or they radially deviate the hand. These muscles, as their name indicates, radialis, they are located laterally along the side of radius. So when they contract, in addition to extension, they can radially deviate the hand. Similarly, in the flexor compartment, we have flexor carpi radialis muscle, which lies laterally. That muscle also radially deviates or abducts the hand. So this is radial deviation. So extensor carpi radialis longus, extensor carpi radialis brevis, and flexor carpi radialis, they can abduct or radially deviate our hand. The other muscle in the superficial layer is extensor digitorum muscle. So at the name indicates digitorum, this muscle acts on the digits and the main extensor of the medial 4 digits. So as you see it here, it originates from lateral epicondyle and it's inserted into the medial 4 digits. So distally, the muscle will give 4 tendons, and these 4 tendons, they are inserted into the posterior surface or extensor expansion of the medial 4 digits. So as the name indicates, extensor digitorum, its main action is extension of the medial 4 digits. But in addition, it crosses the wrist joint, so it can also extend the wrist joint. It's a strong muscle. It extends wrist and the medial 4 digits. So as you see it here, it's a strong muscle. It extends wrist and the medial 4 fingers. The other small muscle is extensor digiti minimi muscle. So it just lies just next to the digitorum muscle, and it's a detached part of the extensor digitorum muscle. So extensor digiti minimi. So digiti minimi, it stands for the 5th digit or the little finger. So it also originates from lateral epicondyle and is inserted into the extensor expansion of the 5th digit. And section is extension of the 5th digit. The most medial muscle in the superficial layer is extensor carpi ulnaris muscle. So extensor carpi ulnaris, it has 2 heads or it has 2 origin sides. It originates from lateral epicondyle of humerus and the posterior border of ulna from here, and is inserted into the base of 5th metacarpal. It's inserted here. And the most medial muscle. So in addition to extension, it adducts or ulnar devates the hand. So this is ulnar devation or adduction. So in addition to extension, it adducts or ulnar devates the hand. Similarly, flexor carpi ulnaris also adducts or ulnar devates the hand. Now let us see the muscles in the deep layer. There are 5 muscles in the deep layer. We have supinator muscle. We have abductor pollicis longus muscle. We have extensor pollicis longus muscle. We have extensor indicis muscle. And the last muscle is extensor pollicis brevis muscle. So with the exception of supinator and extensor indicis, the remaining deep muscles, they act on the thumb. So pollex in Latin, it means thumb. So abductor pollicis, extensor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis brevis, their main action is on the thumb. And all of them are innervated by radial nerve. So first, let's see supinator muscle. It's a short muscle. It doesn't cross the wrist joint. It's a very short muscle. It ends here. So it originates from the lateral epicondyle of humerus and from the posterolateral border of the ulna. And it's a short muscle. It curves around and immediately it's inserted into radius. It's inserted into the posterior, lateral, and anterior surface of the radius. As you see it here, it's this muscle. It surrounds the radius. And when this muscle contracts, it will supinate the forearm. It will return the crossed radius into its original position, which means it supinates the forearm. The other muscle in the deep layer is extensor indicis muscle. So indicis stands for index finger. So this muscle, it acts on the index finger. So it originates from the distal part of ulna and is inserted into the extensor expansion of index finger. So its main action is extension of index finger. The other muscle is abductor pollicis longus muscle. This muscle lies just below spinator muscle. So this is abductor pollicis longus muscle. So it originates from ulna and is inserted into the base of first metacarpal. And as the name indicates, abductor pollicis, it abducts the thumb. So this is abduction of the thumb. The last two muscles are extensor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis. So their name, as the name indicates, their action is extension of thumb, but one of them is longer than the other. So we have longus and brevis. So these muscles lie just distal to the abductor pollicis longus muscle. This is abductor pollicis longus. Distal to abductor pollicis, we have extensor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis muscle. Especially brevis is related with the abductor pollicis longus muscle. Their tendon runs together. So when we see their origin, longus originates from ulna and from the adjacent interosseous membrane. Brevis originates from radius and from the adjacent interosseous membrane. Brevis, as the name indicates, short. So since it's short, it's inserted into the base of the proximal phalanx of the thumb. But longus is inserted into the base of distal phalanx of the thumb. And their action is obvious extension of thumb. So this is extension of thumb. So the three muscles that act on the thumb, abductor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis brevis, and extensor pollicis longus, they emerge under the superficial layer. So they crop out or they emerge under the superficial layer. So they are known as outcropping muscles. So as you see it here, these three muscles, they emerge between digitorum and between the extensor carpi radialis muscles. So they are known as outcropping muscles. And when we fully extend our thumb, there will be a depression at the base of the thumb. And this depression is known as anatomical snuff box, or is known as radial fossa. So this, the outcropping muscles, these three muscles, they form the boundary of the radial fossa or the anatomical snuff box. And this snuff box has two boundaries, anterior and posterior boundary, or medial and lateral boundary. So the anterior or lateral boundary is formed by the extensor pollicis brevis and abductor pollicis longus muscle. So their tendon runs together and they will form the anterior or lateral boundary of the anatomical snuff box. Extensor pollicis longus, its tendon runs separately and it forms the posterior or medial boundary of the snuff box. And the floor of this depression is formed mainly by the scaphoid bone. Scaphoid is one of the carpal bones, and it forms the floor of this depression. And the main content of this depression is radial artery. So radial artery, it crosses this depression. It runs obliquely in this depression. So we can feel the pulse of radial artery at the anatomical snuff box or at the radial fossa. So the outcropping muscles, when we fully extend our thumb, they will bound depression, which is known as anatomical snuff box. So that's all about the muscles in the posterior compartment of the forearm. So see you all on Wednesday. Have a great day.